everybody, welcome back to the Chaotic Little Book Corner. My name's Acacia. Today we're going to be doing my January Part 2 wrap-up, which is going to be the books that I read in the second half of the month. I do not include the ones that I read in my Diversathon, which I have done the wrap-up, and I will link it down below in the doobly-doo. So I'm just going to update you guys real quick. I am not going to be reading this week very much, and if I do, it's going to be purely light, simple reads, and I will tell you why. I am very emotionally drained from Diversathon. I really put a lot into it, and I'm really tired. I drained myself there. I drained myself this weekend. Emotionally, I'm just not there, and I am going to give myself permission to kind of have a week of chill. So I will be reading very little in the next week, or this week that is right now, which is the last few days of January going into the first few days of February, and then I will be right back on track. So yeah, there's definitely going to still be videos. Don't even worry about that. That's happening. The end of February, though, the last week, I'm not sure if I'm going to do the last week of February or the first week of March. I will be off filming because I am going to be on vacation, staying at a friend's house on her couch in Los Angeles. So if anyone is in the Los Angeles area and wants to have coffee, let me know. So let's dive into this wrap-up. Let's start here, which is Face in the Water, and this is by Jeanette Frame. Now, I am not going to be doing a full in-depth review on this right here. I'm not really going to be reviewing it much at all, actually. This was the Mad Woman's Book Club Book of the Month this month, and therefore I will be doing a dual review of this and the book that we read in February at the end of February, because you guys seem to like that dual review for those. So that is what I'm going to be doing. This talks about the mental health environment in Australia, and that is all I'm going to let you guys in on. So yes. And then we have this. This is Margaret the First by Danielle Dutton. Now, I saw this on Savage Reads' channel, but I had been seeing it around in bookshops prior to that as well. I'd been curious about it, and can we just talk about these bright yellow end papers? Like, I'm in love with those. Anyway, I heard Simon talk about it, and it seemed intriguing, and I was in a historical fiction mood, and I wanted something short that could be digested before Diversathon, and this kind of just fit the bill. So I picked this up, and it was very well done, but nothing so deep and dark that I couldn't just digest it in one or two sittings. It was a lot of fun to read. I really enjoyed it. I actually am more excited to read Margaret's works herself. Her name was Margaret Cavendish, and she was a sci-fi fantasy feminist writer during the time of, I believe, the mid-1600s. She was alive and living in France during the English Civil War. She was sent to Paris with the woman that she worked for, who was a queen, and they were sent into exile, and then she met a gentleman who worked within the courts, and she fell in love with him, and she married him. He supported her throughout her life as a writer, but she was not supported by many others, and had an interesting kind of experience where her will and her feminine energy was very different from that of the time. So she was an interesting character to learn more about. Definitely think it's one that, if you're interested in it, I would pick up the book rather than just have somebody tell you the review, because I think it's better that way. Then Amanda Center and I did a buddy read. So this we began at the beginning of the month, and we actually finished it on the 17th because Amanda was going to be gone. And so I read almost 1,000 pages in 17 days. I'm not sure how I did it. This was a really digestible book. The writing was actually pretty easy for me to follow, and the chapters were extremely short. So it was really easy to just kind of fly through it, and the subject matter was just so intense, and you just... The other thing was I had seen the film, so this was almost like seeing the film again, but with backstory. And so it worked really well for me as a person who already had the experience of the story. This is Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. I really loved it. I think it's definitely now one of my favorite books of all time. However, it was only a 4-star read. That is something I think I'm going to discuss later on in my channel, is going to be how I rate books and what they mean to me. I do think that this actually opened up my eyes to some feelings that I had about people and how I expect people to behave. And I think that Scarlet is actually a really interesting conversation about gender. I really, really love this book, and I'm so excited. I was lucky enough to receive this from Scribner. This is their new edition, and I am in love. This is my first 5-star read of the year. This is Idaho by Emily Rushkovich, and I would have to say that the characters in this book are not the most lovable characters, but they are the most incredibly well fleshed out and intense and sympathetically hateable characters that I have encountered in a long time. The story revolves from several different points of view, some of them going into a prison, some of them going back and forth in time. They talk about mental illness and dementia and aging and insanity and isolation. It is a really, really amazing book, and I highly recommend it. I saw it all over BookTube as people hauling it for ARCs, but then I never saw anyone speak about it again so far, and I'm really surprised because this seems like an incredible book, and I believe this might be a debut. Yeah, this is a debut, so Emily, I will buy anything and everything that she comes out with from this point on. I am floored by this book, and I found it just incredible. I read it within 2 to 3 sittings, and I adored it. It is a shorter book. It is 290 some odd pages, but so I usually rip through that in like a day, but with this one, it was so emotionally draining, I had to take it slow. It was incredible. I really appreciated it. Then we have this. This is Selection Day, and it's by Aravind Adiga. Yeah, Aravind Adiga. I think I'm pronouncing that properly. I looked it up, and I tried. I'm really trying. But anyway, this is a story that takes place in India, and I was astounded by this. The language of it was hard for me to digest in the first 50 pages, but then once I got into the flow of the book, it was so easily digestible. It's a really interesting story about fatherhood and sons being the prodigy child. It has a lot to do with people being expected to be one way and expected to like one thing when they're actually really good at another, but they are expected to have a certain lifestyle. It intrigued me so much, and it gave me so much more knowledge about the Indian culture. I actually really, really want to read other books by this author. I think that it's incredible, and from what I understand, if I'm correct, on Goodreads they said that this was not his strongest book, and that makes me extremely curious because I thought this was an extremely strong novel and really interesting, especially as far as diversity goes, because I'd never read anything that took place in India before, and so this gave me a whole new genre of... This gave me a whole new culture to be interested in, and faiths and ideas and lifestyles, and it was really, really fascinating. It was really, really well done, and I really enjoyed it. I definitely want to read more. And then I read this nonfiction, and this beast, it's not even that big, but oh man, this exhausted me. This was so tiring. This was good. I liked it, but it is definitely nonfiction at its nonfiction-iest. It is a nonfiction talking about Bellevue Hospital and the history of Bellevue Hospital, mental health-wise and other. It talks about how it was one of the first to have a nursing program. It was one of the first to have a teaching nursing program. One of the first hospitals in the US to have an ambulance service. It was really interesting. You got to kind of learn a few different people who have stayed there, and then you also got to learn about the history of Bellevue as a conglomerate, and it was really, really well done, but it was a lot of information, if that makes sense. So it felt a lot more draining than it was necessary. I enjoyed it, but it was definitely heavy on the nonfiction aspect. But there are some photographs of like the history of Bellevue and nurses and things like that. So it's a good book, and I'm really glad that I own it. But it was a lot. It was a lot. It was a lot to read, and that's all I can say about it. It was just a lot. So yeah, that is my part 2 January wrap up. It's not that exciting, honestly. I read good books. I really enjoyed everything I read, but I didn't read as much as I normally read, and I'm okay with that. And I will talk to you guys in my next video. Bye!